This is Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. Here now, Tony Bruschi.
On August 30th of 2023, a 12-year-old boy climbed out of a window in Ivins, Utah. He walked to a neighbor's house. He was emaciated. He had duct tape wrapped around his ankles and his wrists. Underneath that tape were open wounds, deep lacerations from being tied up with rope for extended periods of time. He knocked on the door and asked for two things: food and water. Then he asked to be taken to the nearest police station. The neighbor pulled up his sleeves and found more tape, more wounds. And this child, this starving, injured child, according to the neighbors who spoke with police, looked at the adults around him and said, "I got these wounds because of me." That statement alone tells you everything you need to know about what was happening inside her house. Jodi Hildebrandt's and Ruby Franke's. The child had been psychologically broken to the point where he believed he deserved what was being done to him, that he had earned it, that the torture was his fault. And here's what really gets me. The women inside that house, the one who, according to search warrants, put those ropes on that child's wrists and ankles, the one who mixed cayenne pepper and honey into a paste and smeared it into his open wounds, she wasn't some random abuser. She was a licensed mental health counselor by the Mormon Church. She had clients. She had a business. She'd been operating for nearly 2 decades, and people paid her thousands of dollars for what she called therapy. The church, the Mormon Church, recommended her. She was on their recommended list for many years. She'll help you. Her name is Jodi Hildebrandt. And on December 30th, in case you're sitting there going, I need something to do. I need to get away from family. I need to do something. I need to just... This may be one of those moments where over the holidays when you have family around, you're like, it's shitty, but at least it's not that. At least it's not that. Netflix is releasing a documentary that finally puts the spotlight where it belongs. Not on Ruby Franke, she deserves plenty of it, the YouTube mom who carried out the abuse, but on the woman Ruby Franke herself, blamed for leading her into what Franke called a dark delusion. The documentary is called The Evil Influencer, the Jodi Hildebrandt Story. It's directed by Skye Borgman, the filmmaker behind Abducted, In Plain Sight, and Girl in the Picture. If you've seen either of those, you know she has a very specific skill unraveling how manipulation works, how seemingly normal people get down and drawn into unthinkable situations, and how predators operate in plain sight. Everyone else around them fails to see it. That's the story that we're going to talk about here and what to expect in this doc that is coming out. I know I will be watching it without a doubt. Before we get to that, if you don't mind, be sure to press subscribe wherever you're listening to us or watching us. If it's on Apple Podcasts, please press subscribe. If you got a moment, leave us a review there. We would greatly appreciate that. And if you're on YouTube, press subscribe there. Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. You can search that on Apple or on YouTube, and you'll find us. And leave us your thoughts in the comment section. This has been such a crazy case. We've learned so much about this case this last year from Jodi, from her husband, from the husband of Ruby, who has spoken out, from the kids. There's been a lot of revelations on this story this year. And here's another chapter in it that's about to come out. So again, I'd love to get your thoughts on YouTube in the comments section. So that's the story here. Because Jodi Hildebrandt didn't just show up in 2023 and start abusing children. According to former clients and licensing records, she had been engaging in problematic practices for years. And people knew. They filed complaints. They left reviews. They warned others, and nothing happened until a 12-year-old boy decided he'd had enough and climbed out a window. So let's talk about who Jodi Hildebrandt actually is. Because the version of her that made headlines, the business partner of Ruby Franke, the co-defendant in the child abuse case, that's only part of the picture. And it's not even the most important part. Hildebrandt got her license as a clinical mental health counselor in Utah in 2005. By 2007, she found something called connections with an X. Connextions, you know? Being tricky with those letters. A relationship and business counseling service based in Orem. She also worked as a director for a program that treated pornography and sex addiction, which tells you a lot about her worldview and where her ideology was headed. In 2012, according to Utah Division of Professional Licensing's records, her license was put on probation for 18 months. The reason? She disclosed confidential patient information to the LDS Church and Brigham Young University without consent. One of those patients, a man named Adam Paul Steed, he told NBC News that Hildebrandt made false claims about him to the church, to BYU, and to his ex-wife. He says he lost his church privileges, was suspended from the university, and his marriage ended. His quote to NBC, "My family got destroyed. My life got destroyed." The LDS Church removed Hildebrandt from their family services referral list, finally. And then she kept going. She pivoted to life coaching. Because you don't necessarily need a license for that. And it sounds pretty nifty. And if your rates are just a little bit lower than therapist, well, what a deal that is. She built out connections into an online program. DVDs, workbooks, workshops, group sessions. The road to enlightenment with Xenu at the end. Okay, not quite that, but we were probably just a few steps away. She branded herself as an expert in living in truth. She attracted a devoted following, particularly within the Mormon community. You know, the one where the church said, we probably shouldn't recommend you anymore. She was very attractive still to that community, and that's a whole other conversation for another video as to why her recipe for disaster spoke to so many women. And the ones that started to get to know her, some loved it, and some, the complaints started piling up. Former clients described the same pattern over and over again to media outlets and in public reviews. Hildebrandt would methodically separate spouses. She would pathologize normal behaviors as addictions, especially anything related to sex or porn. She would encourage people to cut off family members, friends, anyone who wasn't living in truth, according to her definition. And she would position herself as the only person who could help, you know, like a deity. One former client wrote in a public review, she sets her clients up to depend only on her so she can keep collecting your money. She reminds me of the abuser in an abusive relationship. Another told NBC News, if you're meeting with Jodi, then you're all living in truth. She didn't want you talking to anyone else about your problems. This is where it started to feel cult-like. A therapist who says she trained under Hildebrandt stated publicly, I believe she's evil. I don't say that lightly. I have done so much therapy for people coming out of her cult who were traumatized by her work. Those are the kind of reviews you get. I believe she's evil. Yelp, can you take that one down? It seems a little much. And here's the thing that should make you furious. All of this was documented. It was in Google reviews. It was in formal complaints. It was in licensing board records. And Hildebrandt kept operating anyway because she wasn't technically practicing therapy anymore. She was life coaching, and that apparently doesn't require the same oversight. It doesn't. So, by the way, if you're getting into the new year and you're going, you know what, I want to take control of my mental health, great. That's a wonderful thing to do. That's a great goal. That's a great ambition. Just be very cautious of the word life coach. There are some good ones. There are. Not everyone who uses the term life coach is out there, doing this sort of shit. But also know it's probably not a therapist unless they actually have the licensing. And there's a reason for the licensing. Then Ruby Franke entered the picture. Franke was already a controversial figure, a YouTube mommy vlogger with 2.3 million subscribers who had built her brand on strict discipline and rigid parenting. Viewers had been raising concerns about her content for years, but when she connected with Hildebrandt around 2019, things escalated in ways no one could have predicted. By 2021, Hildebrandt was living in the Franke home. According to Kevin Franke, Ruby's now ex-husband, in his lawsuit and public statements, Hildebrandt told the family that shadow figures were tormenting her and she needed to stay with them for protection. Shadow figures. Kevin says Ruby requested what she called an in-home separation from him. An in-home separation. She stopped letting him upstairs, basically. Eventually, according to Kevin's account, Ruby was sleeping in the same bed as Jodi. Like you do with your therapist. He says the two women experienced spiritual visions together. Is that what we're calling it? In 2022, Ruby shut down her 8 Passengers YouTube channel and pivoted to working with Hildebrandt full-time. They rebranded as Moms of Truth and started posting parenting advice together. Strict discipline, faith-based philosophy, the whole package. Behind the camera, according to court documents and Ruby's own journals, the abuse was already happening. What police found when they finally got inside that house in August of 23 was the kind of thing that makes seasoned investigators pause. According to search warrants, 2 sets of handcuffs, rope, duct tape, bowls containing a red liquid, gauze dressed near a paste made of cayenne pepper and honey. There ain't nowhere in any medical journal, any YouTube video, any TikTok, any place you're going to find any sort of balm or homemade concoction to rub on a wound that's going to say cayenne pepper and honey. Mix. Apply. Other than Jodi fucking Hildebrandt's. Ruby's journals, released by prosecutors, detailed forcing her daughter to do physical labor for hours, cutting off her son's oxygen supply, binding wrists and ankles, making her daughter run barefoot on hot pavement. One entry read, Jodi told E she has no idea what is waiting for her. You go back to that review, I believe Jodi Hildebrandt is evil. It checks out. Prosecutors said both women were motivated by what they called religious extremism. Yeah, and keep in mind, all this in the name of God. Yes, this wasn't just Jodi thinks this is the way to go. No, this is the right way. This is the path. The official statement from the Washington County's Attorney's Office was this: the women appeared to fully believe that the abuse that they inflicted was necessary to teach the children how to properly repent for imagined sins and to cast the evil spirits out of their bodies. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Does that sound a little bit like Lori Vallow Daybell? Another one spun out of the Mormon church. The Mormon church, of course, saying, we have nothing to do with these people. They're not us. We wouldn't do anything that crazy. We just walk them up to the line. And then when they get nutty, we're like, nope. We didn't take you to the well to get this poisoned water or anything. And yes, the Mormon church does not endorse this sort of shit or anything of that nature. And they do a lot of good and all that. I'm not making this a condemnation on the Mormon church, but there is an inordinate amount of people who seem to spin out of this church and commit horrible crimes compared to the actual amount of Mormons that exist versus the amount of horrific crimes that are being committed. It's very out of sync. It doesn't make a lot of sense. You would expect it to be a very small percentage. In fact, it's not. It's like one of the larger categories. Makes you go, And in jailhouse calls released as evidence, you can hear exactly how far gone both of them were. Ruby in one call, quote, adults have a really hard time understanding that children can be full of evil and what that takes to fight it. Jodi in another, so now it's abusive to make a kid sleep on the floor. It's ridiculous. You can't even raise your kids anymore. That's not remorse. That's not even denial. That's someone who genuinely believes they did nothing wrong. So how does someone like Jodi Hildebrandt even exist? How does she operate for nearly 20 years, according to former clients, destroying families, isolating vulnerable people, and eventually physically torturing children? And no one stops her? The answer is uncomfortable because it implicates a lot of systems that are supposed to protect people. Licensing boards that don't have jurisdiction over life coaches, because there is no licensing board for life coaches, by the way. You can make one up, and there are some out there. There's some certification programs, which mean absolutely nothing. We could create a certification program right here, right now, and start selling it, and it would be about as valid and official as any other one that exists. The Hidden Killers Life Coach Confirmation Program. Join today. Set it and forget it. But wait, there's more. When you call right now, we're going to give you Lifetime's music collection of Jodi Hildebrandt sings 1980 show tunes. You're going to absolutely love it. Wait till you hear her rendition of the Growing Pains theme song. It is, whoa, show me that smile again. Religious communities that defer to authority figures and discourage questioning, a culture that treats credentials as proof of trustworthiness, and influencer economy that rewards anyone who can build a following, regardless of whether they're qualified to give advice or not. Hildebrandt understood something that most predators understand. Vulnerability is exploitable. She targeted people who were already struggling with their marriages, with their faith, with the sense of self. She offered certainty in a world that felt chaotic. She gave them a framework, a language, a community, and then she isolated them from everyone who might challenge her control. The research on cult dynamics describes exactly what former clients say she was doing. Isolation, dependency creation, shame-based control, us versus them thinking, gradual erosion of critical thinking, gaslighting. These are documented, studied tactics. And Hildebrandt, with her background in mental health, would have known exactly which buttons to push. Ruby Franke, at her sentencing, said this: for the past 4 years, I've chosen to follow counsel and guidance that has led me in a dark delusion. My distorted version of reality went largely unchecked as I would isolate from anyone who challenged me. That's not an excuse. Ruby made choices. She carried out the abuse. She wrote those journal entries. She pleaded guilty. She's accountable for what she did to her own children. But it is an explanation for how someone goes from YouTube parenting videos to cayenne pepper and open wounds. It happens in degrees. It's insidious. It happens when someone with a talent for manipulation finds someone willing to be led. Both women were sentenced in February of 24, 4 consecutive sentences for 1 to 15 years each, minimum 4 years, maximum 30 under Utah law. Hildebrandt's first parole hearing is scheduled for December of 2026. But here's the thing that should keep you up at night. A federal lawsuit filed in January 25 alleges that Connections, Hildebrandt's business, continues to operate even while she's incarcerated, that people are still following her teachings. You're still leading ill horses to water, or poisoned cayenne honey pepper flavored water. Isn't that zesty? That's the ideology she built. It's outliving her incarceration. That case is ongoing. And there are families out there right now who say they were destroyed by Jodi Hildebrandt long before Ruby Franke ever met her. Former clients still untangling the psychological damages. Marriages that ended. Relationships with children that never recovered and never will. People who trusted a licensed professional and say they got manipulated instead. Think of the trauma on those kids that will now be lifelong because of that. The Netflix documentary drops December 30th. It's going to bring a lot of attention back to this case. And that's a good thing, because the question everyone should be asking isn't just, how did this happen? It's, how do we make sure it doesn't happen again? Because I can guarantee somewhere out there right now, there's another Jodi Hildebrandt. Someone with credentials and charisma and following, someone telling vulnerable people exactly what they want to hear, someone positioning themselves as the only source of truth. And the only reason we know about Jodi Hildebrandt at all is because a 12-year-old boy decided he'd had enough. He climbed out a window, he walked to a stranger's house, and he asked for help. That boy's courage is the only reason any of this came to light. Think about that. A child had to save himself because every system that should have protected him failed. That's the real story here. And it's the one we can't afford to forget. Give me your thoughts in the comment section on YouTube. If you're not already there, search Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. Make that same search on Apple Podcasts if you're not already there listening to us and taking us with you as you go. And if you don't mind, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That helps us grow in the rankings and lets other folks know that you like us. It signals to others, hey, here's some good content here. If you find us valuable, you find it enjoyable, you find it something of positive nature, please leave us a review there on Apple Podcasts and let us know your thoughts in the comment section on YouTube. Until next time, my name is Tony Bruschi. We'll talk again real soon.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Bruschi and the Hidden Killers podcast.